Hey there, welcome back to Business as Unusual. In today's episode, we're diving into the art of mindful melodies with Mama Nous. We'll explore how this talented musician recharges through music and nature, and why she believes that healing ourselves is key to raising empathetic, kind kids. Stick around. This one's a feel-good journey you won't want to miss.
Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aicila.
Welcome to Business as Unusual. I am very delighted to introduce to you today Mama Nous. Welcome to the show, Mama.
Thank you,
Mama
so
Nous. I should call you Mama.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I am really excited to talk to you and introduce you to our guests. I met Mama Nous through a mutual, I guess at this point we're friends, we're work buddies and colleagues, and she recommended that we interact, and I looked at your site and I was like, wow, yeah, this is fantastic. For my listeners who haven't had the opportunity to do that, would you be willing to tell them just a little bit about what you're up to and how you got here?
Yeah, so I'm Mama Nous. I share songs and magically mindful parenting strategies to help folks raise good humans. And I've been doing it for about a year and a half now. And I really share mostly through social media. So it started out as just a fun little project of, I've been writing songs my whole life. And once I had kids, I just was like constantly making up little ditties for them. And then on a whim, I decided to just start a TikTok and share them. And the reception has really shown me that there is an appetite for music that doesn't talk down to kids, that really taps into their innate wisdom and offers teachable moments with empathy and with kindness and with good music. Because I don't know about you, but most children's music drives me crazy. It feels very infantilizing, and the lyrics are just overly simplistic in a way that I don't think serves kids. So I'm here to offer a different perspective.
Now, I feel that my kids are grown, and I remember when they were younger, the constant search for media that represented the type of respect that I had for them. Like, because I had my children when I was younger, a lot of my friends were in their 20s as well and didn't have kids. And they looked at them like aliens. And I'm like, just think of them as socially unaware adults. They don't know all the social rules, which is in some ways a gift. However, I know it can be weird. But otherwise, they're just like you and me. They're looking at the world. They're trying to figure things out. They have their own thoughts.
Exactly. And I think they're capable of so much more than we often give them credit for. And that's one thing that's so important for me in my lyrics is I don't believe in talking down to kids. Obviously, you want to use simplistic language that they'll understand, but I am constantly amazed at the level to which children are able to rise if we give them the opportunity, if we take their questions at face value and answer them with open-hearted honesty. I think it's really beautiful. Obviously honoring the fact that they're new to this world. There's so much that they don't know, but they're so open-minded and so open-hearted, and they really have so much wisdom to share.
I agree with that. When you think of success in this work, how would you define that?
That is something that I'm constantly struggling with because there are kind of two sides to the way that I view success. And the first way is through a capitalist lens, right? And so right now, this is very much a side hustle. I do it in my downtime. I have a full-time job, and this is just a fun thing that I share because I believe in it. But my ultimate goal is to leave my job and eventually do this full time. And so that goal is to replace my income. That is a very tall order, especially when I'm trying to keep my products affordable and I'm offering a lot of free content. And so something that I've really, really had to work on training myself to see is the value through the lens of impact. Because if I view my success through how many people I'm impacting and the way that I am supporting families and children, I'm killing it. I'm doing a great job. I get so many messages and comments from people who say things like, this song healed a piece of me that I didn't even know that was broken. And I'm like sobbing now. And what a gift that is. Like, that is so far beyond any kind of monetary value, but it's so easy to get caught up in the money side and forget about that. So it's a piece that I'm constantly trying to come back to center around of, obviously profit is important. And eventually I would like to make this into a real full-time business so that I can devote more of my time and my attention to it and really expand it in the way that I think that it deserves. But in the meantime, even if I was not making a dollar, the stories that I get from people and the impact that I know I'm making is so much more important.
Mm-hmm. It is. Well, and one of the things so I do business strategy, I call it business cartography for people, because it's exactly what you're talking about. You have to measure your different projects and programs along the spectrum of the return. And one of those returns is financial, and as is investment, right? Like, it's both. And one of them is energetic, and one of them is inspiration. That's what I call it. And then one of them is, I call community or relational. And you have to have a mix of all of those. If everything is financial cost and financial return, most people are going to get drained, especially solopreneurs and creatives, right? So you have to have things that give you energy and inspiration, like what you're talking about, and build your network, your community, your impact, and your connection to others, right? Both in terms of referrals and reach, but also in terms of being part of things. We all yearn for that. And then everything has a time factor to it. How much time does it take and in order to develop? And then also the draining thing, that's where the energy and the inspiration come in. And so I encourage my clients to have a spectrum of things. You can have one project that's all energy and inspiration and community and no financial, but if all of your projects are not going anywhere, in the same way, if they're all financial, but the rest of it isn't there, eventually you'll burn out and you'll be like these people who are like, I made lots of money and I hate my life and I have to start over. So the mix is what gets you to that satisfying business.
Yes, I love that you pull out energy and inspiration. That's such an important piece that I hadn't even really named, but I think that's one of the reasons that this project is so fulfilling for me is I've got my day job, right? The financial needs are covered, but it is so fulfilling to share something, this piece of myself that is really just play. As I've been building this business, I've been trying to make sure that I give myself permission to be playful. If it's not fun, I don't want to do it. And that kind of makes up for any financial lack, or I am putting a lot of time into it, but getting that return on the inspiration piece and really being witnessed in being my fullest, most playful self is so satisfying on a really different level.
It's what feeds your abilities to do other things. That's when I do organizational strategy. A lot of times the folks they feel almost shy. Oh, I know I do this thing and it doesn't make a lot of money. And I'm just like, yeah, but I can see that it feeds you. And if it feeds you, that's also important. And in the same way that, like, a lot of folks, I say I do social media for people that hate social media, because a lot of my people are like, I hate it, but I have to do it. And I'm like, one, you don't. Let's start with, this is your business. You can do whatever you want. And it's something like, I'm going to say the wrong percentage, but some high percentage, like over 60% of commerce is done offline. Like, you do not have to do things online to be successful. It's just what we all know. And that may change in the next 20 years. I don't know. But being really present to what you have to do is figure out how to get the word out. And social media and websites have some benefit to that, but they are not the whole process. What's more important is that you don't do something that drains you so much that you don't want to do anything else. And then we can talk. So anyway, that's a little rabbit hole, but I really honor you for that, because it's a hard sometimes choice, especially in a very capitalistic society, to really value the things that bring out that being seen and that inspiration and that energy. And it sounds like you're also really impacting other people, which is such a beautiful experience.
Yeah, I think that's a piece of it that's really fulfilling, is realizing that I can be a model for other people to be more playful and be more silly. And it's kind of funny because I have really leaned into just being earnest in this project, which is not necessarily well, let's just say my 25-year-old self would think I was very cringe in some of my videos. But the videos that I often think are cringiest, where I'm giving strategies for just how to be playful and how to bring more joy into your connection with your kids, they're the ones that take off the most and where I get the most positive comments. So it's so funny how sometimes my ego wants to get in my own way. And when I make that conscious effort to say, oh, actually, I think this is a sign that maybe this is something that will give people permission, because it's not something we see very often. Let me get out of my own way. And it almost always lands in a way that I don't expect.
I love that. What in your life or your past set the stage for you to get into this or see this as a need? Is there a story or a series of stories that you can share that could give us a sense of that?
I think the most fun thing about this project is that it weaves together so many threads that have dangled throughout my life, but I never was really able to pull together or never really saw a way to make a business out of. So when I was a kid, I loved playing imagination games. And when my sisters would be playing princesses, my favorite character to be was the wandering minstrel. And I would walk around with a guitar and I would just be making up songs, like narrating what was going on. And there's so many aspects of this work now as Mama Nous where I'm just guided by my inner child. I'm just doing what my 8-year-old self would think was fun. And in terms of what inspired me to start sharing it out, I have been a songwriter for my whole life. Before I met my husband, I wrote a lot of sad girl folk, as I call it, like songs about heartbreak. And then I met him and I fell in love and my inspiration dried up. So I didn't write a song for quite a while. And then I had my kids and all of a sudden it just came flooding back, like that wandering minstrel energy of just, I'm changing your diaper and I want to make this go a little faster. So I'm just going to make up a little song about it. And I had my kids in 2020 at the height of the pandemic. So we were in lockdown. I had twins, didn't know what I was doing. And like a lot of parents, I turned to the internet for like surrogate parenting friends and inspiration. And there's so much wonderful content out there, but I had a lot of trouble specifically finding music that I resonated with. And music is very important to me. And part of my parenting philosophy is, of course, we have to shift our lives when our kids come, want to allow them to become part of my life and not sacrifice my whole self for them. And so there was this piece as I was like thinking about, oh my God, am I going to play like Baby Shark on loop for them? And I was like, no, I don't want to do that because I don't want that in my own head. And I don't think parents should have to choose between music that they like and music that's positive for their kids. And so that was really the impetus to start sharing. I know a lot of other parents around my age who have similar musical styles. And I was like, let's see what happens. And it really resonated. So it's been good.
There's a decent number of people who don't like kids' music and probably can write music, maybe not the same talent, but there's a lot of people in the world and have parents and have kids. Can you identify something that was different for you? Like you experienced these things and then you were like, and I'm going to do this about it. Do you have a moment or like an understanding of what sparked that for you?
That has been 100% a reaction to the reception. I really didn't know what I was doing at first. I just was sharing out and just posting often and just seeing what stuck. And there were two kind of themes that came through. Number one was how many adults were paying attention to these lyrics and really resonated with these positive messages that they didn't get when they were a child. And so I use simple language, but I explore big concepts. One of my songs is called Listen to Your Intuition, and it's about listening to that little inner whisper to keep you safe. And that's a message that I think all of us needed to hear growing up. And a lot of adults, even childless folks, have reached out to say, I listened to your album on repeat, and it's been such an important part of my inner child healing journey, or like me reparenting myself. And so that's been really cool. This part is a little bit harder to explain, but another thing that I have realized is people pick up on the energy that I'm putting out. So this is something that I haven't really talked about, but I call my parenting style like magically mindful because I do believe in energy healing. It is a piece of my life that my mom exposed me to. I've done like Reiki in the past, and I feel energy as this physical, tangible experience. And many times when I'm singing, especially like the most meaningful songs, I'm channeling that energy. Whether or not I mean to, it happens. And I've been very surprised at how many people pick up on that, where they'll say a song gave them goosebumps or it healed part of them that they didn't know was broken. And I think it's really powerful to think about music as an actual healing force. It is an exchange of energy. And that has set me off in a different direction. In addition to the children's songs, I'm now sharing more affirmations, positive chants, and mantras. And people have really, really responded to those. And I think that has a lot to do with that energetic exchange, whether or not they recognize what's happening. So that's been really cool too.
I love that. I read these 2 books at the beginning of the year, The Experience Machine and The Case Against Reality. And they talk a lot about the neuroscience and the physics of our experience of the world and our understanding that actually the space-time definition of our universe is not actually real. Mm-hmm. And there's that part of me that's just like, I sound like I live in this super hippie town that I don't want to be associated with when I say this stuff. And it also, everything in this like story, I'm like, oh, it's real. This is all real.
Exactly. And even if we don't know how it works or why it works, I always think about psychosomatics, where whether or not that's real, the fact that we can make ourselves believe something so much that it changes our physical reality, that to me is magic. I don't need to know how it works or why it works. That's pretty magical.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate you sharing that. Do you have some advice that you can share that you've received that's influenced the way you approach your work?
I haven't treated this as a business in such a way that I have sought out advice from others. Actually, that's a piece that I'm growing into. This is honestly the turning point with it, where I'm shifting away from it being like me being a content creator, this is a side hustle, to really stepping into this is a real business and looking to surround myself with a little bit more support. I don't know that I've received advice, but the piece of advice that I constantly come back to is this fun? Does this spark joy? Am I giving myself the opportunity to treat my business as a playground to be doing the work that brings me the most enjoyment? And the other piece of it is I always want to be really clear in the work that I'm doing that I am not a parenting expert. I am not a parenting coach. I am not a therapist. And it can be a little bit tricky with the way that I share content to make sure that I'm doing it in such a way that is fully aligned with my own expertise and experience. And so I run the risk of imposter syndrome, and it's something that I come up against a lot. And whenever I start to feel that feeling of, oh, I'm an imposter, I don't belong here, this isn't for me, that is a signal to check in with myself about whether or not I'm in alignment. Anytime I get that kind of like wobbly feeling of, am I presenting myself as an expert in a way that's unfair? I come back and check in just about whether this is in alignment, whether this is really mine to teach, or whether this is just something I should talk about and give away. So that's been a really powerful practice for me, especially because for many decades in my career, I felt like constantly saddled by imposter syndrome. And so now to be at a point in my life where I'm like, no, I actually feel fully aligned, fully grounded in the fact that I am the right person to bring this work into the world. This work is making a difference. It's been a really powerful practice.
That really sounds like great advice and embodied wisdom and trusting yourself. Are you familiar with, I don't know if he has a title, Gabor Mate? He's a trauma therapist.
Yes.
I recently became familiar with his work. And one of the things that he talks about a lot, it sounds like you would be familiar with this, the most dominant examples of parenting are the default of taking kids away from trusting their own intuition. Mm-hmm. And some of it is that larger instinct, and some of it is your kid's unhappy and you want them to be happy, and maybe you were never taught how to be with your own feelings. You're like, it's okay, you're not sad. And I see people do that, and no judgment to folks we're all trying to figure this out. And I love that the song example that you brought up of trusting listen to your intuition, because I feel like that's one of the really important things that we need to, as parents, model for our kids, both how we do that and also how we support them in finding their own way. It's so easy to slip into the I know best or I got this, right? And there are times, as the socially aware and able to see risks your kids can't see, that you do need to assert a certain boundary. But my own experience was rare. They were pretty good at understanding what they needed and recognizing what danger was, and being pretty. If I supported that in them, they pretty much had that. At any rate, you just made me think of that prevalence of something that doesn't happen. I can imagine there are a lot of adults who appreciate that permission because they maybe didn't ever get it.
Mm-hmm. It comes up a lot around emotions in general as well. And that is, if I have one goal, it's just to give people permission to embody and feel their feelings, because so many of us were disconnected from them at such a young age. Kids know what they're feeling, right? They feel all of their feelings, but they quickly learn which ones get them praise and which ones they need to turn off if they want to be accepted. And I hear from so many adults who really appreciate the fact that I'm talking at the level for 3 and 4-year-olds about, no, it's actually okay to feel all of your feelings. Anxiety might feel this way in your belly. And it blows their minds because they're like, I was never taught any of this. If I didn't have a smile on my face, my parents would get mad at me. So I think there's something really powerful about offering tools that I know have value to adults who maybe weren't as honored and cherished and delighted in as children, and using the perspective of talking to children to help heal that, to make it really accessible.
Mm-hmm. I worked for 13 years in the LGBTQ social justice movements, and one of the things that struck me frequently was how often gay adults wanted to help gay kids. And I was just like, we also need to help gay adults, because my personal belief was that they wanted to help gay kids because they lacked something and they wanted the kids to have it, which beautiful. And I'm like, but you're not the only adult that doesn't have that. We have to find ways to offer other adults that same gift because they're still hurting.
Mm-hmm. And also, through that process of healing yourself as an adult, you are able to embody and model it in a way that's really powerful. And that's why I love what I'm doing so much, is because you really can't effectively teach something that you don't know how to do. And so I totally understand that instinct of not wanting younger kids to experience the same hurt that I did. But it's really in healing yourself and figuring out how to come to your own truth, your own grounded, embodied sense of yourself, that you're going to be able to offer this model and vision of, this is what waits for you on the other side, or this is what's possible, this is what you can be. So I think that's so powerful, and it's so easy to forget. So many adults just want to make life easier for their kids. And I'm like, no, we got to stick with the hard stuff. We got to be willing to heal the hard things, even when it means making mistakes with our kids, even when it means not being the perfect parent, because actually those mistakes and those flaws and those mess ups give your kid permission to recognize that it's okay to make mistakes, that this is all how we learn. This is all part of the journey.
Yeah. Well, and then they learn too, when you're able to say, I shouldn't have done that. I was wrong. I'm sorry. how do I show you? I mean, that teaches them better than anything what it looks like to be respected and also to have room for human experience. Because this idea of perfection is not real. There was a doctor's office when I was in my 20s that had a sign. It said perfectionism is the highest form of self-abuse. And I was just like, I don't like you right now. The other thing I noticed when one of my kids was really young, I was a primary caregiver, and I noticed them walking around biting their lip. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I was curious, like, there's a lip hurt, is it itchy or whatever? And then I was washing my hands and I noticed that I did that. And it just was this aha moment. And so after that, I just would, like, when they would do something that I didn't like, I would first try to identify, is there something in me that, I don't know, like, you'll notice kids will grab things out of adults' hands, and you'll notice that the adults, when the kid has something that they're not supposed to have, they'll grab it. And so I was like, well, what if I don't do that? I just would say, hey, that's not for you. May I have it? And they would just hand it back to me. And I realized that the more I paid attention to how I behaved and how I reflected the way that I wanted to be in the world and my values, the less I had to say anything.
Exactly.
I didn't have to give them corrective actions because I was not. And like I said, I was a primary caregiver. I had a lot of influence, but I still find that to be true, even as adults, when I go and do that hard work of facing something. Like, I'll have a situation where I'm like, gosh, I don't love this thing. I'm going to deal with this in myself. And it does still have an impact in how they show up. And it's magical. And I love and hate it because it means that I have to start with, like, trying to be a grown up still. I was like, when they moved out, I thought, well, I get to be. No. And it's also great because I have this really good motivation to keep striving to improve myself and to show up as that grounded, aligned human that I want to be.
I love that. That is exactly what I always say is our kids are mirrors. And that's one reason that I think, like, recognizing that having kids is going to hit you in all of your deepest wounds. And you need to be ready for that because they are going to mirror back to you the things about yourself that you don't like, the pieces of your childhood that didn't go the way that you wanted or weren't held in with the level of compassion that you needed. And it's going to hurt and it's not always fun, but it is really magical when you recognize how much agency you have in influencing your child just by embodying the kind of person that you want them to become. And then you get this lovely side benefit of being the best version of yourself that you're capable of being, which is pretty cool.
I definitely relate to that. And also the times, I just remember one time I heard myself, my mom used to say this to me all the time. And of course, so I just thought it was fine. And I came in and the kids were frustrating me. And I said, I'm going to beat you with a stick. And I heard it come out of my mouth. And I was like, oh, I'm not. Oh, she used to say that all the time. No, she never did. She was never going to beat me with a stick. But of course, I don't want to say that to my kid. But I didn't even know those words were in my head until I heard them going out into the universe. And I was like, well, that's not how we're going to show up today, is it? I said, no, I didn't mean that. I am really frustrated with you right now, though.
Yeah.
Give me a minute.
This is
Let me just work that out.
Isn't it interesting, though, how the words that we hear throughout our childhood become part of our inner narrative and then have a way of just coming out, not even consciously necessarily, but they're just like that loop that you have, or the tape that you have on loop in your head. A project that I recently completed was an album of reimagined nursery rhymes, because if you sit down and actually listen to the lyrics of, my kids learned Ring Around the Rosie at school a couple of weeks ago, and they were like, Mom, what's ashes? And I'm the kind of mom who answers my kids' questions honestly. And I ended up in a whole conversation about what cremation is, which was way over their head, and I shouldn't have gotten in that deep. But I was like, wait a minute. I don't necessarily want them singing these songs over and over with lyrics that are questionable. And the reception to that project has been amazing. Just how many parents are like, yeah, I didn't realize like how heartbreaking You Are My Sunshine sounds until I sang it to my newborn, and now I can't sing it anymore. So it's been interesting to be able to reframe those messages and offer a different sort of loop for their inner narrative.
Well, the stories we tell and the words we use do matter in combination with actions. Obviously, it's like the way we show up in the world. But I hear myself, I've been really working to just remove violence from my language. And it's so incredible to me. It's one of the things I love about texting, honestly, is several years ago, I learned the statistic that women apologize on average 17 times a day and men on average twice.
No.
And we are literally apologizing for our existence all the time. And I was like, well, that's not great. But texting is helpful because then when someone sends me something and I start to type, I'm sorry, I could be like, am I actually sorry? No, I feel for their heart, or that sounds really hard. And so like I worked on, and because I worked on it in texting, then I could translate it more to verbal communication. And so similarly, I notice now when I'll say, let's shoot for that. And I'm like, I know that doesn't mean basketball. So I got to change that. Or let's pull the trigger. No, don't want to pull any more triggers. But coming up with the replacement language in the moment, or if I'm in a meeting with random people, I don't really want to stop and start again in that. So I'm doing the same thing where when I text, I'm like, oh, I could take 4 minutes to figure out what I really mean here. Because it's so embedded.
So embedded. I love that. Not surprisingly, with what I'm doing, I get a lot of hater comments. And one of the most popular one is just like, oh, you're so woke. Like, we listened to these songs as kids and we turned out fine, blah, blah, blah. Like, why do you care? And for the most part, I just block, delete, and move on. But what I always want to say is, I actually think it's really fun to try to do my best. I don't see it as a burden to try to be more mindful or more aware of the language that I'm using. Yes, sometimes it takes an extra 5 minutes to figure out how to replace a phrase, but I think it's fun to try to figure out how can I use language that is really aligned with the person that I want to be. It doesn't have to be seen as a burden.
Right. Well, and it's interesting, like I have some good friends who are vegetarian, and I've noticed that people will be very angry at them because they feel somehow like my friends' life choices are about them. Because they don't eat meat, they feel the folks that get fired up about it, if you walk through it, they assume that my friends look down on them because they do eat meat. And it's really not to do with you at all. They made choices for their own reasons. You could ask them and they would tell you. And I eat meat. I have eaten meat in their home. Like if we get takeout, they'll get me chicken. They are not judging anyone. They never, and that's, to me, that was when I noticed, oh, there's a lot of folks out there who really take other people's lives personally in a way that has nothing to do with reality. But the reaction isn't coming from that. It's not coming from other people's behavior. It's coming from some insecurity or fear or, yeah.
Yeah. One thread that I've also noticed is I think social media has trained us to take everything personally because these algorithms are designed to serve up content that they think you'll like. And at least I have noticed when my content gets served up to somebody who is not in my target audience, they feel angry that they had to be presented with this alternative viewpoint. And there was a TikTok that went viral a couple of months ago, and it was all about how to make bean soup. And the comment section went crazy with people being like, I can't eat beans, so what would you substitute? Can you please give me a recipe that'll work without beans? And it's, you need to just find a different recipe. This isn't for you. But everybody has this perspective of, I'm the most important, or I'm used to content being designed to my needs. And so there's this weird angry streak that happens where, yes, I think a piece of it is feeling judged. But another piece is just, I don't want to be exposed to the fact that there are other viewpoints. I just want to be in my bubble.
Yeah, I do feel like social media has really amplified some of those tendencies. So interestingly, joy is the most viral emotion, obviously, but anger gets the fastest reaction. It's the way life works, right? Like, and so that's why the cat memes and the funny stuff will go farther because, and what you're doing, my guess is that similarly, because we are so much more interested in that. However, the rage and the anger and the reactive stuff is more immediate. And so it looks like it's a bigger deal. And it can be, obviously, because people can be quite terrible. I have a rule for myself. If I start typing, because I have to correct someone who's wrong on the internet, as I'm typing, I ask myself, does this further anything I care about in a way that is meaningful to me? And if I don't immediately say yes to myself, I delete it and I move on. It's a really easy question to ask to stop my inner nuclear reactor.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, this doesn't fit with anything else I care about.
Yes, I love that. It took me way too many decades to learn that. Just be like, nope, better off just moving on.
As a parent of young children in any situation, my kids were close in age, so I have a small understanding of the juggling act that is. And also an artist, and with a full-time job. What do you do to recharge and to get inspired?
Ooh. I think what's interesting about what I do is that I do find it recharging. So when I have a few minutes to myself, a lot of times I do leave the kids with my husband and go into the other room and grab my ukulele and sing some songs. Because it's just what I love, and it's fun to have a gift that just feels so in my wheelhouse, and to give myself some time to like really enjoy that and play with that. The other piece is go outside. So nature is like my number one grounding ritual, the place where I recharge. We're really lucky to live on some land, and it's pretty private. So I spend a lot of times just embodying my own inner child. I've never been a fan of meditation. Like, I have an ADHD brain and I just can't sit still and meditate. What I can do is go to our pond and stare at frogs, or lie down in the grass and look at clouds. And that's definitely one of my favorite ways to bring myself back to center.
That's lovely. Well, and that's a form of meditation. Also, interestingly, meditation is neurologically not for everyone, in that for some people, it can actually be harmful.
Oh, I did not know that. That's very validating.
I'm one of the podcasts that I love is a little bit culty, where they dive into all these different topics. And they had someone on who was associated with the meditation center. And he said, interestingly, a lot of the research on meditation has folks from this meditation center that doesn't want it amplified, that it has harmful effects for some people. I was just like, even meditation, so angry. But so it's not you. It's that it just doesn't work. There are no panaceas. Although I will say, nature honestly does seem to be going outside, grounding, like that does seem to be consistently beneficial to people. But I used to live in a town where there was an air quality warning. So sometimes you can't do that too. There's no panaceas. Unfortunately.
100. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. And for folks that are listening, how do they learn more, follow you, get in touch?
You can find me all over the internet. So my name is Mama Nous, MAMANOUS. And I'm on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. And then I also have a website where you can learn more, mamanu.com.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you doing this work, honestly, and sharing your experience with me and our listeners.
It was so great to chat. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye, everybody. Talk to you next week. I hope you enjoy the show. I love making it. If you did enjoy it, consider hopping over to the review portion of the platform you listen on and letting other people know about it. Or share the episode or the entire show with a friend, or subscribe to the show. Definitely reach out, get on my newsletter, follow me on social media, and let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see in the future. While we love our guests, appearance on the Business as Unusual podcast or any Bicurean consulting production is for information purposes only, and is not to be considered an endorsement of their business practices, or character. Please properly vet anyone you find through this podcast and generally before you do any business with them. Thank you for listening.